So, welcome to
Uh,
Director's Notes. It's my absolute pleasure to speak to you about Marcel the Shell. And I have to say that I do a list every year of my top 10 films. And I normally err towards the dark and twisted, but you blew me away. And Marcel was my number one.
wow! Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm deeply honored. Thank you. That's unbelievable. I do too, actually. I think
Yeah,
tend
normally
towards
mine would be like a
the
dark,
dark and twisted.
twisted Mexican tale of doom or something. But Marcel just it was the film that I watched the most, and I was talking to my partner about it, and he was like, "Well, if you've watched it the
Oh.
most, then clearly it's your favorite." I was like, "Yeah, you're right." So
Oh
there
wow!
we
I love
go.
that. I love that. I love that we've helped broaden your sense of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was checking out some interviews today, and I heard you describe sort of everything you went together as a soup of collaboration. So obviously, apart from the wonderful narration, how did you come to be working with everyone to create the feature?
Oh wow. Well, I think I knew Jenny first because we created this character over a decade ago and made some YouTube shorts. Um, and Nick Paley, who's our co-writer, he was one of my friends from college, and we had kind of come up editing as editors together, and we would hire each other on, if we were working on a show that needed another editor, we'd send jobs each other's way, and then so we've been working together for over 10 years now as well. And Liz Holm, who was kind of the first person that Jenny and I called when we started making this film, she's another very old friend of mine and Jenny's, and they met because she produced Obvious Child, which was this indie movie that Jenny starred in, I think 2012 or something like that. And so it's that rare project where you get to work with all your friends, and it's just a beautiful collaboration and family of creatives. The other sort of part of the brain trust was our financiers slash producers, Cinereach, who are a New York based nonprofit actually, who finances films that they believe in, and we were lucky enough to be one of those.
Brilliant. Um, it's just amazing. And one of the things as well is it brings everything in. You've got stop motion, you've got live action, you've got documentary. How did you plan and weave sort of all those threads together to come up with your final narrative?
Well, it was a really unique process. So from the beginning, I felt like I want to make I want to make the first. I don't even use the word mockumentary because I think it sounds like it's going to be, I don't know, mocking something or someone.
Yeah.
um, but I felt like, oh, I want to make the first mockumentary that is not making fun of documentary or its character or its subject. I want to extend the same dignity and kind of focused, careful, thoughtful attention to this subject that you would extend to a normal documentary subject. The only difference is that he is a fictional character. He's a one-inch talking shell. so, so it was all for me. It was all about how do we engineer this process of making a narrative fiction film so that it is as much like documentary production as possible. And I have some experience in documentary, and so at every turn we were kind of deconstructing the normal production process we were all used to and figuring out like, well, okay, how do we breathe this sort of authentic documentary life into what is normally a very blueprinted, pre-visualized, execution focused process? How do we build in exploration and spontaneity? And what we came up with was that or what we kind of eventually found through a lot of trial and error, is that we started with the script, um, and Nick Paley and I would write for 3 or 4 months based on this outline that we had pitched. That's how the movie started. Based on this outline, we'd write for 3 or 4 months, and then we would record for a few days with Jenny, and then we would repeat that process over again. So on the recording days, we would get everything that we'd written, maybe 30, 40 pages or something, and then we would, while we're there, because you're just recording audio, there's no big production elements or money being spent, you have the freedom to say, okay, that scene actually didn't work. What if we try to get from A to B in a different way? Or maybe Jenny comes up with like a really funny joke that's better than the joke we wrote. And it was this iterative process of like several months of writing, followed by a couple of days of audio recording, And then because Nick and I are editors, we would edit the cobble together the stuff we liked from that, and then we'd do it all over again. We'd write all those we'd write all those things that were, you know, the gems of that recording session into the next phase of scripting. So we did that iterative cycle for like, I think it was about 3 years.
Wow.
But at the end of it, and that 3 years also includes, at some point, Kirsten Lepore, the animation director, and I started drawing storyboards for all the shots, so bringing a visual element in. And at the end of that 3 years, we had arrived at a finished screenplay and a locked audio play, or like an animatic at that point, because it had storyboards. So that was actually what those 3 years were spent just, you know, it's basically the storytelling. The first bit of storytelling in a normal narrative film is the writing, and we had this way of writing that screenplay that allowed for spontaneity and for the characters to come to life in ways that you couldn't if you were just sitting down at a computer. And then we moved into live action production. Sorry. We moved into live action production. And that was maybe the easiest part because we all know how to make a live action movie. And shot all the background plates, all the human interaction, all that stuff, and then cut that together, basically laid those shots over our audio play, and then we went into animation phase where we took all the elements that were interacted with at the house, all the props, the surfaces, all that stuff, broke it all down, moved it onto animation stages, and then animated Marcel and the other characters. And then the last phase was comping them together in post.
Yeah, well, it works amazingly. What equipment did you have to use? Because obviously you're filming the big sort of live action scenes in the house, and then you've got the really small, like nuanced bits where you're out of the window and the table. Did you have lots of cameras and rigs?
I think we were all single camera except for the 60 Minutes shoot is my memory. The interview section.
Yeah.
And otherwise it was all single camera, because even though there's all this kind of sense of it feeling spontaneous or off the cuff, it's actually very restrictive in some ways, because you have to shoot the shot. Marcel's not in it, so even just to give people focus marks and stuff, you have to like Kirsten was on set every day puppeting this little Marcel on a stick so that the camera operator could get focus marks. And then we have to take all these notes about the lighting. So our stop motion DP was on set every day, writing down all this meticulous information about how to recreate the lighting exactly. So I think the trick is that it sounds spontaneous and kind of like I just came over there to that house with my camcorder or whatever. But it's all a big illusion. There's a ton of meticulous and very hard work from a lot of people that goes into making it seem completely effortless.
Yeah. I mean, it was 7 years. It was a long time.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
One of the things as well I wanted to ask you about, so you spoke about the lighting. I mean, the cinematography is brilliant, and you can see that that's really well planned out. But even though, as you were saying, it's meant to look spontaneous and things, how did you go about planning that tone?
Well, that was a big collaboration between me and Bianca Klein, who was the DP on the live action phase of production. And then we have because stop motion it just has a lot of technical constraints that a live action DP, or if they've never shot that way, they wouldn't know how. So we had a second DP, Eric Atkins, who was our stop motion DP, and it was a big collaboration between the three of us. It was basically figuring out, okay, how do we kind of codify the the like je ne sais quoi of those original videos and of Marcel as a character. And what we kind of came up with was we want it to feel natural. We don't want to break the conceit of it being documentary, but we also want it to be elevated and feel as much like we want it to feel like all the shots were captured naturally, but we also want those shots to be like the most beautiful version of that corner of the house. And so especially working with Bianca on the live action shoot, she was doing a lot of like scouting the house. We basically lived in the house for like a month beforehand, or we didn't live there, but we were there every day before shooting, and it is all one real house. So we got to, go scout. Our location scout was just going from like the living room to the office or the kitchen or whatever. But it was a lot of figuring out of like, and she's especially incredible at this, figuring out how to taking photos, figuring out, okay, the light in this room is gorgeous between 3:30 and 4:15. And so let's plan our shoot around capturing that. And then also, if, for example, if we were losing light, or if the shot required multiple passes, so the light was changing, she would augment what naturally happens or recreate what naturally happens, so that we had control over it and it could stay there for as long as we needed. But it was always a dialogue with actual nature and the actual light in this house.
Yeah, beautiful. And then talking about the stop motion. So you worked with I mean, excuse my pronunciation here, the Chiodo brothers?
Yeah, Kyoto.
Kyoto,
Yes,
there we
the Kyoto
go.
brothers. Yeah. They are, yes, they're like, legends in the stop motion world. And they actually made their first movie, scared the living piss out of me when I was a child. It's called Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Okay.
I couldn't watch it until I was like 12 or something. But their character, they're animators, and have had a whole lifetime of experience in stop motion animation, and they were, really instrumental in terms of figuring out, Kirsten, our animation director, also really brilliant stop motion animator, but they were, I think, essential in figuring out, listening to us and what that vision was for this, and then figuring out, okay, well, what are the brass tacks production and creative, like logistical things that you need to do in order to achieve that. But they were, excited to work on something different. I especially chose them because it felt like they didn't totally care about the rules, and that is very important when you're kind of trying out things and experimenting and figuring out how to make a stop motion movie that feels like a live action documentary.
Yeah. How did you choose? There's all the little bits, like the little tree houses that they have, and
Yeah.
sort of him climbing up the walls, and all these incredible little elements that make it, I think, so relatable. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what drew me in. How did you choose on what to focus on in the house?
Um, Gosh, that's a great question. I think that by the time we had the house, we already had this animatic that had storyboards and a lot of those concepts, like the honey wall, honey footsteps, and the tennis ball as a car, and the tree houses, all that stuff was sort of developed and fleshed out at that earlier stage before we had found the house. And I don't remember what portion of it changed once we found the actual geography of the house, and whether, I'm sure we did a lot of like catering to what was offered by the space, but a lot of those ideas were really like me, Nick, and Jenny kind of all putting our heads together, and Kirsten, putting it, like, I know that we had an ongoing text thread where when an idea would pop in our head, or I'd be working on the animatic, I'd say, what is Nana Connie's tombstone? And all of us just over the next few days, we're like, oh, could it be a domino, could it be a blah blah blah, could it be a stick, all these ideas, and then finally dawned on us, oh, chess piece, perfect. And and so there's a lot of that, just brainstorming, and I mean, having a good time making each other laugh was how we got to a lot of those ideas. And then a lot of them also were generated by me and Kirsten when we were storyboarding, because we were like forced to put ourselves. If you start with an audio play, you're not considering the geography all the time. So once you start storyboarding, you realize that you have all these problems on your hands, which is like, oh, he's in the living room here. How does he get to the mantle? How's he going to blah, blah, blah? And so Kirsten and I, we just sat down every day over Zoom for probably a year or something and drew out every frame of the film. And over that course of that, we had to put ourselves in Marcel's position and figure out, all right, how would I get up the wall or whatever?
Yeah. And one of the things it really reminded me of is a childhood favorite of mine, The Borrowers.
Oh yeah, The Borrowers is great.
Yeah, so it's using those sort of household items, as, like you said, projectiles, as different things, and that's just so beautiful. It's like you didn't create something else; you just used what was there.
Yes, totally. I always loved the Barbers too, and I also love a few of the adaptations that have been made
Yeah,
from it. And yeah, I think I rewatched Arrietty and one of the other ones just when we were kind of thinking about contraptions and how to
yeah,
turn human waste into useful items.
yeah, absolutely. So then what about the score? Because the music is great. And again, it adds to that fabulous feeling. How did you
Hmm.
approach that part of it?
I feel like I understand the our creative path on that much more. Maybe this is always the case, much more now than when we were working on it.
Mm.
Um, I I had always been a fan of Rich Vreeland, who AKA Disaster Piece, and um, he's an incredible, very very talented musician and composer. And I've just been a fan of his for like years and years, and I was like really, tried to make sure we had time and resources to get him to work on it. And yeah, he totally knocked it out of the park. I would say the thing was that drove us a little bit was when we were writing and storyboarding all this stuff. I was listening to a lot of ambient music, like uh, specifically '90s Japanese ambient music, um, uh, and I think because it works so well. Like I use that for some of the temp tracks, and there's a few tracks that are on the soundtrack that we licensed from artists from that scene. But I think that what appealed to me was that it almost a lot of those albums feel cyclical. They don't feel like telling you how to feel about a specific moment, or when you put them to a piece of cinema, they don't feel like they're telling you exactly. It's not prescriptive in that way. They feel like cycles. They feel like vibes that evolve over the course of the entire song, and or tighter instrument cycles that kind of evolve and add instruments as they go along. And that always felt like an apt metaphor for Marcel and for this story. And so
Yeah.
when Rich and I started working on the score, those were a lot of our references and trying to figure out. I think the things that are really loud and apparent about Marcel, like the fact that he's small, the fact that he's cute, the fact whatever. Uh, those to me are always the things that are the most fun to bury a little bit
Mm.
and not hit super hard because they're so apparent already. If you hit them super hard, it sort of feels like, I don't know. I, as an audience member, hate it when I'm watching a movie and the character's clearly sad and the shot is telling me to feel sad, and then the music comes in and it sounds really sad. I just think that there's much more interesting ways to go about scoring a piece of film, and my favorites are when you feel like this rhymes with what I'm seeing, but it also contradicts it in some ways, or it enriches it, or deepens it in some ways. And so it was a process of that, by and large, just figuring out what's the piece of music that you would expect to hear here, and then
Yeah.
what's the way to deepen it.
Yeah. And I mean,
He
that's
also,
how
oh,
I think that develops
sorry,
a lot
go
of
ahead.
the emotion as well. No, go on.
I was just gonna say he has this he Rich said to me this thing that I think about all the time when I'm making movies, which I was sort of like, why do some pieces of music feel like they are recalling, or like they're nostalgic, or like they're from the past, and others might not feel that way. And or no, sorry, I know what it was. I was sorry, I was talking about the score in Minari, because I really love that score as well. And I was like, why does it work so well? And he said, well, music in films almost always speaks to the past. And I was sort of like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, if you think about, oh, sorry, music in films almost always speaks to the future. I'm butchering this. um, music in film almost always speaks to the future. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, when you see in Minari, for example, there's this building kind of vaunted celestial feeling music, but it's paired with a shot of like a budding, a tomato on a vine. It's the imagery is kind of banal and very terrestrial. And then what you're hearing is this thing that takes it, really seems to revere it, and it's very vaunted and um, godlike or something, or
Mm.
reverent. And so you're looking at that little thing and feeling, oh, in the future, this is going to become something great. This image that I'm looking at, the music is telling me that this is actually extremely important and borderline, um, godly. And I thought that that was so interesting. And he told me that towards like the end of working together. And when I look back now at our film, I think that it does that in a way that I love, which is that the music is often these cycles that slowly evolve and either or sometimes devolve or sometimes build to something new. And that's what happens with Marcel. It's all about life cycles. It's all about death being a prerequisite to growth and to new life. And I love that.
No, that's brilliant. Well, look, thank you. I could sit here and speak to you all night, but I've been told I have my
Oh, you have to go? Darn it. Oh, shit. All right. Well, thank you,
Thank you
Sarah.
so much. This has been a real pleasure. You've made my night.
Yes. Oh, same to you. Thank you.
Good luck with everything. And yeah, look forward to seeing more.
Oh, I'm great. I mean, that's great. I'm happy to hear that. Okay. Thank you.
Bye, Dean. Bye.
Later. Have a good evening.